Welcome to Nantucket by Design. I am Kathleen Hay, one of the proud sponsors of this evening's Nantucket Summer Antique Show Preview Party, a partnership between the NHA and the Antiques Council. On behalf of Kelly Williams, the chair of this year's MBD event, as well as the entire board and staff of the NHA, we are thrilled to have you join us for tonight's very special event. Renewal is the theme of this year's Nantucket by Design, so appropriate and timely as each of us looks for ways to renew our spirits, our relationships, and our environments at home. And who better to lead a discussion on renewal than the incredibly talented interior designer, Alexa Hampton, an Architectural Digest 100 All-Star who has mastered the art of integrating antiques into modern interiors that work for modern life. Among the myriad things Alexa gives her time to, she also serves on the board of our MBD partner, the New York School of Interior Design. Alexa is joined in this discussion by someone who is near and dear to the Nantucket Historical Association, Mr. Arie Kopelman, a past NHA president and an antiques aficionado himself, having chaired the Armory Show in New York for many, many years. Alexa and Arie are dear friends of one another, and we are so excited to have them as our guests as they discuss how to use antiques in modern interiors of all styles to create character and warmth and evoke a sense of renewal. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Arie.
I do mind, I'm going to just say something before Alexa, because I have to tell you that her dad, Mark Hampton, who everyone recognizes was one of the most brilliant people in the history of the design industry, was a great friend of Coco's and mine, and in fact did our very first apartment after we were married. And we're hitting a, oh my goodness, 50th anniversary this Christmas. So I have known the Hampton family for a long time, and I'll never forget, it's over 20 years, just over 20 years that Alexa's been married to one of the most wonderful guys. The wedding was in Athens, and I'll never forget when your mom and Mark called and said, "I hope you're coming to the wedding." And I said, "Oh, it's so exciting. Where are you having it?" And they said, "Oh, it'll be in Greece." And I said, "I'm calling my travel agent." And when we read, and by the way, when we recently wanted to freshen up our apartment, because some of the fabrics had been fried by the sun and a few little minor details like that, we just picked up the phone and called Alexa and said, who better to continue the process? And she's, I have to say, in our judgment, every bit as good as Mark, and that's really saying something.
That's saying a lie is what that's saying, and I love it. Lie to me, Arie. No, it's wonderful to get to do this with you because we are such old friends. You do have such a relationship, not only with the NHA, but a relationship with collecting antiques, as anyone who has visited your house on the island knows. And I think we both really speak this language together, right?
Absolutely.
You what?
Oh, yeah. I think that's 100% right. We both have a passion, but you're the pro. And you're the one that can put it all together and make it work. And that's very important in today's times, even though there's a movement towards eclecticism in design and mixing, and that's a wonderful thing, but it still takes a real pro to make that work, because I think it's even harder to do than if one was just doing an all period room.
Totally. And I fervently hope it is hard to do, because otherwise I'd be out of a job. But it's been really interesting watching the field of interior design in the last, forever. But for me right now, it's been very interesting because we've gone from a moment that was so taken over by mid-century modern. And then that movement became, which is gorgeous, by the way, when you have those amazing pieces that are original to the period. And then it became so ubiquitous that people's interiors all looked like each other's interiors. There was no specialness. And there really were moments when I would get phone calls from people saying, is brown furniture gone? Are we ever going to have antiques again? And I felt totally confident when I heard that question years ago that yes, we would have antiques again. And I do think we've experienced a pendulum swing out of that neutral, sleek interior into a world of maximalism in some cases and collecting in others. And it just these pieces that are highlighted in an antique show and in the houses of people who are enthusiasts, they have importance and they have meaning, and they tell stories, and they tell stories not only of the origins of from whence they came, but of the people who are attracted to them. And there's a function and a form, obviously. So I was looking through some of the offerings this year, and this is a fantastic console that I looked at and I thought, oh, I like you, mister. And I definitely, there are really useful ways to have a piece like this. I think there's nothing better than when you walk into an apartment to have an opening salvo that gives you a sort of thesis statement about what you're going to see when you go further into the house. So if we look at the next slide, you will see that I love to have a moment of, an entry hall console. And sometimes you can have a memento mori on it of almost talismans of what you're interested in and what you like. In this picture, I've also cheekily put a mirror underneath just to wink at you as you walk in the door and confuse you about what's coming in. It's also probably an irreverent use of a mirror, putting it on a bottom shelf. But it's just all of these pieces that speak to me and spoke to the client who lived in this house, whether it was an urn or an obelisk lamp, the console itself, or a box. These little things that we look at and that make us feel happy. We hear all of this stuff about Marie Kondo and how you're supposed to get rid of things if they don't spark joy. Well, I'm here to tell you everything in that picture sparks so much joy for me. And I'm so glad we have antique shows, because that is the place where we need to be buying all of these things. We must support our antique dealers, but we know that they are getting them very frequently from these shows. So it's a great resource for us all. If we go to the next slide, who doesn't love a big rambling mahogany table? I just got off of a call with somebody and we were discussing how in great old English houses, you have these dining room state dining rooms, and you can seat dozens of people at them. And that in the past few decades, as people have opened their kitchen into a family room / dining area, the desire or the appetite, pun intended, for these huge dining tables has diminished. But I think this year's topic being renewal, I feel pretty confident saying that there's a renewed interest in separating rooms. I think we all learned, having to be in school and working and on Zooms, we all, we're like Virginia Woolf. We all need a room of our own with a door. And the ceremony of sitting down and being able to eat with somebody after we haven't been able to do it for quite a long time makes my feelings for these dining room tables even more reverential. I think Arie himself has one of the most beautiful dining room tables I have ever seen. And you're a pretty aggressive entertainer, aren't you, Arie?
Aggressive?
You're aggressively entertained.
Oh, I see. I thought you meant we serve a lot of food or something.
No, but I'm
okay.
On board with you.
Well, that's in New York. It depends on how you live. In New York, we have a very formal dining room. We don't have a ton of parties, but I love the room. It's my favorite single room. So even when we're not entertaining, I love just sitting in it from time to time, having a cup of coffee, looking around and saying, oh, this is great. In Nantucket, which is a different style of living, right? And so there we do have one big giant open room, which is a family room, kitchen, and the little dining area all together. So it really is a question of how you live and where you live. So it's easy to do. If you're lucky enough to have a second house, you can do different kinds of things.
I very much look forward to the day that I have a second house, and I don't know what I'm going to try with it, but I'm excited. But I think another thing about dining rooms, people frequently say to me that they don't want to cede a whole room to a dining space because real estate, wherever you live, is so dear. You know, they want to have a room that's multi-purpose, more functions. So I love using, as so many of us do, a dining room as a desk. You know, my husband has his whole setup in our dining room, and that means even if he and I aren't sitting down to, you know, dinners proper, still getting all of the love of that room. We're using it and getting to appreciate it. And I also think for that same reason, dining rooms are really wonderful if they are located in a way that is open, that you can view them from adjacent rooms, so that if you're passing by the dining room and you're not working in it, you still get to appreciate the beauty of a space, and it gives some value to you as you know, a sight to behold, whether or not you're in it. Let's look at the next slide. And I do think it's sexy to have a huge dining room table. I mean, it's kind of like, it's the dream. Here are some beautiful candlesticks. It's funny when I decorate for people, obviously that first pass at a house is the furniture, the curtains, the rugs, and you've got your budget and you do it all, but it's like you've begun, because then you have this whole next pass that you have to do. And if people are starting young, they might, you know, it takes time to accumulate these things. And nobody should be going out and just buying, you know, a house worth of contents and just tossing them in without feeling the meaning of the pieces that they're getting. So going and over time assembling these critical decorative pieces like these candlesticks, I think is part of the fun of it. It's the fun of the chase. It's finding out what you like, seeing how your likes change over time. Though, of course, if you buy beautiful classic pieces, the hope is that they never go out of favor with you.
You know, I just wanted to add, when you talk about, I'm glad you chose that particular picture of candlesticks, because I think even if it's not a formal dinner party, there is nothing like candlelight to set a certain tone. It's warm, it's charming. So whether it's in a little Nantucket space, for example, or it's a very formal dining room in a big city, candlelight just brings a certain warmth and a personal energy almost to a room. So I just think, I don't care what the style of candlesticks are, it just, the light it gives is wonderful.
And it's also special because it's almost a vestigial item. You know, we don't need candlesticks. We've got all the lamps we ever need and the downlights and whatever. So it's an indulgent grace note, and it's ceremonial. So it is worth lighting up the candles. And yes, dining rooms are great so that while you're shoveling food in your mouth, you can look gorgeous. I, of course, like to put a hood over my husband's head when we sit down at the dinner table so we don't see anything that transpires. But that's just me. Let's look at the next slide. So this is just a dining room I did for a wonderful couple in New Orleans. And I like showing this image because when I first met with them, they had a very quintessential New Orleans furniture in their dining room. So, you know, they had a huge dark wood break front, Louis XV. They had their dark brown table, and they had dark brown framed Régence dining chairs, all of them individually beautiful. But I always think it is, in a dining room, mission critical to change finishes. So here you've got the brown table, then we went to the white painted chairs. And then we went back to the brown sideboard, which we changed to a Louis XVI one, and then with the white marble top, so that you don't look like there's an abyss of darkness in the middle of the room. So sometimes I have a white table and then colored chairs or just all upholstered chairs. But I do think it's important to assemble a varied group of finishes within a dining room in particular. And also, back to what you were saying about how, Arie, about how great candles are in a dining room, you know that that is the room most likely in any house to have a little twinkle of crystal and to have a mirror and to have reflective surfaces like silverware. So there's that added idea of the bounce of the light, not just the light itself, but where it twinkles around the room. Let's go to the next slide. So, back to our dining experience. I came late to the party, so to speak, when it comes to china and dining room accoutrement. I think the beginning was I just didn't have a dining room. And then when I got a dining room, it ignited my interest. And I discovered that even though I grew up with my parents in their New York china, which had a lot of blue in it, I have decided that I find blue china, blue detailed china odd because there's no food besides the blueberry that is properly blue. So I love green plates and lettuceware or cabbageware leaves. I love all organic colors to bedeck my dining room, which is also green. Strange, I know. Let's move along. So that is my dining room. So you can see there the green walls, and you can just see my green table settings. And here I have shortchanged blue plates, but I have no shortage of purple items in my dining room. So maybe I'm a hypocrite. But again, this is also showing a dining room as a double duty space. So for us, it's also kind of a library. And as I told you, my husband, in that chair that you were seeing right there on the left image, that's where he parks and looks at his laptop. And then you walk through those, that's a false door, the one with all the leather spines on it. So it folds back and you can walk through into the living room. But I love all these these objets that one can find at antique shows that you look at and you think, where would I put that in my house? And I certainly don't think people should go into an antique show and buy things willy-nilly without any notion of where things are going to go. But if you find things like the candlesticks, like the hurricane lights, like the Aptware urn that's on that column, you're going to find a place for those. And those will bring you only happiness. Let's move along. And Arie, I'm sure you remember, you came over for dinner and you and Coco and I were in the hallway sitting maybe even on the floor. It was for my mother's 75th. And of course, when the Kopelmans come over, they're the only people I want to be with. Okay, here are more objects that are very near and dear to me as the daughter of a classicist. The other organization besides the New York School of Interior Design on whose board I sit is the Institute of Classical Art and Architecture. And I love urns, I love tazes, I love obelisks. It's, I can't tell you what use they would have in any practical sense, but they certainly bring me tons of joy, and they create architecture. And if you're a New Yorker and you're used to living in a house that might be not distinguished by any fabulous architecture integral to your space, it's great to bring them in with the furniture and the objects. So my apartment might date from the 20s, but I bring in these historical shapes and materials and geometries, and it really adds a lot to the interiors.
I just wanted to add something to that because I love these kinds of neoclassical touches. And when we spend some time in the wintertime in the Indian Wells, California area, and there's a lot of talk about mid-century earlier. It's kind of the heart of mid-century design. And we often visit people in homes which are very, very modern, beautiful 50s, 60s kinds of things, but have a very crisp modern sensibility. But objects like these, when put into that environment, bring a certain texture and a certain charm. And it's amazing how it fits, even in a Philip Johnson glass box. If you had folk art or African art or the obelisks, they bring a counterpoint where it all works. And in fact, I would argue that these kinds of pieces actually add to modernism in an interesting way because it brings it out and it accentuates the clean, modern look of those spaces.
That's an interesting topic. It's something I talk to friends about a lot, that when you go to, or you don't even have to go, you just look on Instagram and you see an interior in Paris and you see the elaborate boiserie and it's so beautiful and textured, and the paint and the crustiness, and then you see it juxtaposed to B&B Italia super modern furniture, and it's that energy between the two that's so fun. And so that is kind of the opposite number of what Americans have, because we have so many blank boxes. And so, yes, to your point, that modernism needs that juxtaposition of the historicity of these items that for me are almost like talismans. They might be souvenirs of the grand tour, but they're also their fantasy. Maybe because they have no actual function. They're just totem. Let's go to the next slide. This is my office in New York. And, I love my neoclassicism. I've got my candlestick lamps, my Brutus. They're on a William Kent table. And then, when I have, back to what we were just talking about, when I have an assortment of antiques or at least with Brutus, pseudo antiquities, I love then juxtaposing it with this photograph behind it, which creates kind of an altarpiece of this space. But it is a Massimo Listri photograph of the Villa or Palazzo San Marzano in Tuscany. That is a real fantasy of Moorish architecture. So yeah, back and forth is super important. Let's go to the next slide. Who doesn't love an oil painting? If you don't, I don't want to know about it. I love oil paintings. I love as trivial as this may sound, I love their frames. I think that grounds them in, look at you, Arie. Look at what you're sitting in front of.
I tell you, by the way, anyone that comes to Nantucket always stops at the Whaling Museum because it's a story about Nantucket, but it also shows there's a wonderful collection. For example, this is by George Inness, and it's Sconset Beach, when George Inness painted for a while in Nantucket. And a painting like that gives a depth and a texture to a room that, again, if this were over a very modern glass and steel console table, even, it would work, even though it's a counterpoint in a way, but it would work. Things that mix, I don't know. I think you just have, any great designer can put things together in a way where they look like they were meant to be together. Do you find that sometimes?
Totally. And I also love that here you are at the Nantucket Antiques Show and you have a beach scene. It's obviously you're drawn to certain locations because they speak to you, and having a reference to that location in your fine art is fantastic. So if we go to the next slide, this is one incarnation of the living room. And I have a bunch of paintings by a man named Julian Barnes, and they are of the Forum and of Venice and of the Vatican. And they're all those, as you said, Arie, like textural, and they feel historical. And then I've got that big photograph of the Met Greek gallery, which of course, as you know, my husband is Greek.
What's great about that photograph, by the way, to me, you walk in and talk about depth. It gives almost a trompe-l'oeil that extends the room feeling. And I think the use of these kinds of wonderful photographs is not only decorative, but it adds to the room another whole dimension.
And certainly that's true, whether it's photography or paintings or whatever, that they can function like a window in a room. They give you vista, they give you light, they give you, the romance of whatever it is you're looking at. Let's go to the next slide. This is a beautiful rug that is for sale in the right or wrong, I tend to not like center medallion rugs. I find them, well, I guess that's because a lot of times on rugs, you don't have the furniture centered. So when I have a strong center medallion and my furniture's fighting it, sometimes that gives me stress. So I love things that have repeating patterns. And I look at this very beautiful colored rug. And I also think it's interesting because it's clear to me that it's been cut down. So when I have, and I say that because the medallions are interrupted by the border. So I think somebody had this as a bigger rug once upon a time, and they moved to a different space. And I mean, this could be hundreds of years ago, I have no idea. And they cut down the field and then applied the border. You know, the border is easy to adjust, but they had to reduce the field. And it's worth just bringing that up because if you do have a beautiful rug that you adore and you don't feel as though you are being treacherous by cutting it, you know, if you're going to keep it forever, you're not worried about reselling it, then I'm kind of okay with it. I hope that doesn't make me a heretic. But I think if you love something and you want it to be in your life, you should have it in your life.
Alexa, I just wanted to add a thing about rugs because I'm curious if you feel like your dad did. But I remember when Mark first came to our apartment and he looked at the space and he said, now we're going to start with finding the right rug because everything is about starting with the rug and then we're going to work around that. And then we talked about colors and so forth and so on. I'm curious, do you still do that or are people using these kinds of Oriental area rugs less these days?
I don't do it as much these days. I think, you know, the proportions of your living room are pretty fabulous. And he knew you guys were going to get an antique. So once you have a room of a certain size, if you're going to get a rug of a certain size, it's going to be a palace. So that is sort of a major thing to find. So I can see that, you know, it reduces the field about what you're going to have available to you. So it does frequently direct what happens after you're looking at that size. I think they fell out of favor for a while and are now coming back up to speed, but a lot of people don't have living rooms as spacious as yours. And what I've been doing a lot with clients is we will buy the rug that we love. And it might not cover the whole room, but we will do a rug underneath it, whether it's a sisal or a cut velvet. We'll do the rug underneath it that anchors the room the way a rug needs to anchor a room and how it relates to the furniture. You know, so that you've got maybe a consistent border of 18 inches going around the room. And then we anchor an aspect of the room with the smaller rug that they fall in love with. So in that way, it's freed us up a little bit because you don't have to be wed to only the one particular size available. And also it's a layering thing. I mean, who doesn't love that? You know, when I think of rooms like Kenny Lane's room on Park Avenue South, or a lot of great rooms in New York City that I've grown up looking at and loving that are very collected and very layered. You'd see lots of different rugs and throws and textiles, and sometimes more is more. My father had a little thing on my mother still has it in their bedroom on a table in his handwriting, framed in the silver frame. It says, I do not believe that less is more. I believe that more is more, less is less, fat is fat, thin is thin, and enough is enough. And I guess that was their call to arms. Let's look at the next slide. So this is my bedroom, which is insane because it's all purple and coral. And if you look down at the bottom, you will see my crazy layering of a very vivid orange Turkish uşak on top of a purple and magenta. I know my father's rolling in his grave. Purple and magenta, large scale geometric wall-to-wall carpet. So this is what I mean about enjoying layering. And my New York City bedroom, we're on a corner and we have, fun views, but the room itself is quite small. And I just kind of went for it and decided to lose my mind and saturate it with vivid color. And I'm so happy I did. I did it first in neutrals and it just fell flat. So I had to pull back and rethink everything. Pavlos, my husband and I, we feel very Henry VIII in that room. We feel like we should be eating a bunch of turkey and beheading a child. Anyway, next slide, please. Oh, this is just a beautiful table that I thought, I would love to use that in an almost sculptural way in an interior. The odd corner of the room that, it's not enough space for a bookcase or you don't have something in it, but you could still have photography and objet and things on it. And I love its height. So many pieces of furniture, you get locked into the low register, the, tables, sofas and coffee tables. And as people buy big break fronts or bookcases less and less, I yearn for those other heights. So I think a table like this is perfect. And it's also an unusual flourish to have. So if we move to the next slide. So this is in a corner of my dining room. I would use it like I use that column, just occupying space, bringing the eye up to a different height, and being a destination for trinkets and objects that I like to look at. And this is a beautiful arabesque scrolling console. Actually, it's a farm table. And I mean, you could use that anywhere. You could use it as a sofa table. You could use it as a table to dine at, or you could have it as a console in a room. So the next slide I'm going to show you. This is in another New Orleans interior. And it's in one of those great townhouses that they have that are quite long and quite narrow. And those tables are, perfect up against a wall with all the family photos and lamps. And you create that whole composition of the artwork anchored over the table. And it pushes the rooms out because it makes the center of a room is often where the action is in terms of seating. And as long as you address that perimeter space, it makes you able to embrace the whole room and to appreciate its whole size. And do I have more slides after this? Yes, I do. I have this beautiful mirror. I love this mirror. It's also, it's unusual. It has that beautiful pattern on it. I love the almost election molding around the square of the mirror itself. And I love the over mirror. And it's sometimes mirrors are as much about their own silhouette as they are about the reflection that you can get from them. So I love the space and the negative space that this shape gives. And I would because it's a dainty size, I would absolutely put that in a powder room or over a dresser. I'm going to show you the next slide. I think we all know how bathrooms can be flights of fancy, a little powder room, and they can be very decorated, densely done. And I think that a mirror like that would be a perfect mate for a room like this. And then let's look at the next slide. Arie, this makes me think of you. This makes me think of a table you would love to have. I love those ball feet. I love the fixtures, the fittings, the quality of the wood. It's a very special piece. And I apologize for the whining dog in the background. Let's go to the next slide. I'm showing this slide just to bring back up that conversation about dark wood pieces. I don't think they're going to go out of style. I think they're beautiful. I think not only do they add texture, they add luminosity. And like that chest of drawers, you can see it glowing. Its veneer is so beautiful. And I think even if you had white slip covers and stark pieces around you, those beautiful crisp shapes of a lot of our what people call derisively brown furniture, they are sculpture. You know, you could have all modern upholstery and just a few great wood pieces, and the room would sing.
And it doesn't, you know, it's another comment just about modernity, because this is in a way very fresh and modern. It doesn't look like, you know, your great aunt lived there. It's not old and musty. There's a very fresh feeling about it. And so upholstered furniture and the way a good decorator puts the pictures in mirrors and so forth, it just has a wonderful, inviting, warm quality. And at the same time, as you say, the word crisp comes to mind in terms of a freshness about it.
But that's definitely the interior of somebody who loves to collect. And she is a very stylish woman with a great eye. And she finds, again, apologize for the she finds pieces that she loves. And, you know, because she has a point of view, you know, the things that speak to her, they're able to hold together so well when we use them, because they reflect on her taste. You know, it's not, we're not trying to shoehorn a look onto her. You know, collectors have a point of view, and it's to be treasured and celebrated. Let's go to the next slide. This was the office, my husband's office at our apartment. Then it turned into a nursery with 2 cribs because I had twins, and a twin bed for the night nurse. Then it turned into a nursery with 1 crib when my daughter lived there. My sons moved into our bedroom. We bust through the wall into another room. And now it is still my daughter's room, but a proper room. And I look at this with such wistfulness because it's got this antique Klezmos chair and this Irish Regency. That's actually a dining table, and it opens up and swivels, and you can keep opening it until it seats 20. So it's now in our dining room. But yeah, I wish that room were filled with antiques. Right now it's filled with Taylor Swift albums and a new record player. And then the next slide. Oh, well, who doesn't like a beautiful box? I look at a lot of people's interiors and I see, and I'm guilty of this too, a big bowl with balls in it. And then that's the big decorative gesture. And I love collecting boxes and collecting marble little small pieces. And in this next slide that I'm going to show you, I tend not to want to put objects in cases. I really like books to be in bookcases. But in this room, which is a cerused oak dining room library that we constructed for a client, we had these very composed bookshelves. And so we were able to take certain cubbies in them and highlight an object. So we got, she had a collection, and then we expanded upon it. And we made these compositions on each elevation of book, box. But there was a nice rigor to it. You know, it had a rhythm, and a reason. It's when little crystal figurines and things start getting into bookcases that I get a little stressed out. I'd rather they be on a table. And let's go to the next slide. This is just another, I can't see a coffee table and not want to put a box on it. Here it's a pillow book in a box. And if you have, if you have a collection, if you love collecting, collect, grow the collection. If you just like the object, then just get that one object and salute it by putting it somewhere sparingly, so that you can really focus on the object and not have a lot of noise around it. Would you agree with that, Arie?
No, absolutely. And by the way, I know in the desert we have one brass, very, very modern table from the 60s, a brass table with glass top. And even on a table like that, where we put a box, a very interesting kind of box, older piece, it just looks wonderful, and it gives a certain personality, if you will, to what otherwise would be simply a modern table, which you might see anywhere. So the two together is kind of a 1 + 1 = 3. And that's why I love tables, whether it's a lacquered table from a Chinese influence like that one, or a very modern table. It doesn't make any difference, but a few books or a few pieces that you love they kind of make it alive, and they bring it all together in a wonderful way.
Yeah, and they speak to each other. What that box that you put on your modern table becomes a plinth for that box.
Yeah.
It does justice to the box as much as the box does justice to the table. And do we have another slide or? Oh, well, every decorator's best friend is a pair of brass and glass end tables. And I saw these that are up for the show, and I love them. I mean, they can go anywhere. They can be in the most traditional, they can be in the most modern space. They are classic and of their own in the world of decoration. And in the next slide, you'll see that we used tables just like that, very colorful, wild country house. It was in every other regard very exuberant, very colorful, and almost cheeky. But we were able to add the cheek because we had these very classic forms, flanking. So it, like I said about the box, it becomes a plinth for our fun green lamps. Sometimes you just need workhorse. Good looking, but workhorsey. And I think that's it for my slides. I'm so glad about the renewed interest. I mean, not like it ever went away. Those of us who love antiques will always love antiques. But I'm so glad that people are embracing, in my experience, at least right now, is that people are embracing them again more than ever. And I think the personality and the quirk and the references that they bring to a room are so amazing. I mean, I don't know, if we didn't have these wonderful antiques shows, I would be sad.
Well, also, if you just were looking for things in one particular shop or online or at auctions and so forth, you'd have to be 140 years old before you'd find enough of the things that would finish the apartment or the home. One of the things that party, other than their expertise and their taste, is the fact that they have looked everywhere and found things that you're not going to find on your own. A lot of the pieces come from other homes that are on consignment, or, it doesn't make any difference where the dealer might have found it, but he found it. And so dealers can guide you, not only in terms of providing things that spark your imagination, but the fact that they have something and it's ready to put a big bow around it and bring it home. Otherwise, because not that we all like instant gratification to some extent. Even with a great decorator and you're having so much fun doing it, there's a point where let's finish this already. And I want to have a party, and I want to have a party soon. I don't want to wait. So suddenly you go to an antique show and you'll see a certain thing and you'll say, oh my gosh, I've been looking for 2 years. Here it is. So antique shows really do provide almost a service in a way for designers and clients.
Line. They keep them, the antique dealers who do shows, they don't have all of that online. They keep it for the people who are attending the show.
Good point.
So, you're getting to see something you can't, and also you cannot appreciate things simply online. What might, they might have a great photograph of it, but you really got to see it. You got to see it in context. You got to see it next to other pieces of furniture. You have to see the living finish and the veneer, not to see if it's a good repair, but to really appreciate the quality of the piece. And again, with these shows, they're non-homogeneous, which is wonderful. So you can be riffing on, Georgian pieces, and then you turn the corner and you've gone in a completely different direction because there's a dealer in there who you're seeing wares that you might not have sought out, but you stumble upon them and they remind you anew of things that you hadn't considered.
That's a great point. They also, one thing dealers really do offer, they can educate you from making a big mistake, because after all, buyer beware. These pieces have been vetted. If a dealer has it, and it's a really good dealer, then you're buying something that is what's being described as the real deal, the real thing. And there's not been a leg replaced or this or that, or an assembled piece. So yeah, I think that's really important. Let me ask you a question about, you talked about brown furniture when we started this conversation, and we all know that market got awfully soft. If you had a great piece of 18th century English furniture, are you seeing some comeback on those fronts where you're using them to bring that personality and texture and sense of history? Are you using those pieces again,
We
even in
are.
modern rooms?
We are, but not all types. The old lighted glass break front is still a soft piece, but the dining room tables, all kinds of assorted tables, all kinds of seating, those are a much easier, I wouldn't say easier sell. They're more understood. They make more sense. And also they can transition from lifestyle to lifestyle, where a break front wants to be in a dining room with, china in it. Some things are just phasing out because people have pantries and things like that. They don't want these to what would be to them not useful pieces. But I do think they'll come back, not out of nostalgia, but out of the theme of the show, renewal. And there's not just renewed interest in things of the past and their function and the craftsmanship and the uniqueness of them, but also, aren't we all dying to mingle? This is a renewal of a kind of community. These dealers and that we see once a year when we go to these shows, like, I miss them. I want to see my peeps. And I want to renew friendships or acquaintances, and I want to be in a crowd again.
I wanted to ask you one other question that's happening in the design world. A lot of us, so for example, here in Nantucket, we live in these, early historic houses, or historic styling might be that, even if it's a newly built house. And so painted furniture, country furniture, folk art and so forth. Again, folk art was going through a rough spot. Now it seems to be coming back in a very significant way. So whether it's a weathervane or a painted American chest or a Scandinavian painted chest, are you seeing a lot of use of country furniture, even with some of your jobs in the city, or do you only see that in country houses?
No, I am seeing it in the city. And again, sometimes it's being used as almost like a piece of sculpture, as, if it's in a very modern setting, it's like a totem. But I also think there's, in the great upheavals of the past year, and all of looking and evaluating constructs and evaluation of certain cultures, of other cultures, and how we're all re-examining things. Folk art, I think, is definitely one of those categories that has been marginalized for a long time. People don't think, just look at the name. It doesn't highlight how vivid and amazing it can be. It's considered folk art, but it is so amazing. And it's like out of the hearts of people needing to embellish and paint and make things beautiful. So I think that there is a new value assigned to it, understanding that not everything Louis is dominant. Objects of beauty are worthwhile and valuable wherever they're coming from.
I found that I had a lot of fun doing a little cottage in the desert, because it's all mid-century modern furniture. But it felt, as we brought in these various pieces, it was very cold. It's some of your remarks earlier about changing a bedroom, certain things you say, well, it just doesn't work. It didn't seem to have a personality and a point of view. And by adding just a few pieces of folk art on the wall or on a table, not many, but a few, suddenly the whole room became alive in a different way. And as I said earlier, it almost showed off or highlighted the modern furniture, the mid-century pieces, in a way that they weren't before.
Yeah, you need context to play off of, and sometimes that's completely different. Folk art is very interesting. I think the older I get, the more interested I am in it. I think it's like simple when you're growing up to think that the big historic movements of the Louis or the Georges are the things to focus upon. And as you get older, you realize like not at all. it's all of it.
Yeah, I'm saying, by the way, because I'm not sure it would really be called folk art, but a lot of Scandinavian painted furniture is so beautiful in terms of the texture it brings. And you see a lot of that up here in Nantucket too, by the way, or in people use it everywhere, not just as a country piece, but they are so, the different forms of the paint, whether it's a grain painting or a trompe-l'oeil effect, because of the depth of different tones, lend a certain personality that's also another dimension, particularly in the country, I think.
I think also what's cool about, say, Scandinavian in particular, is they're working in a palette that really sings in northern climates. So if you have a darker, it's not a Bahamian palette. Those colors, are being painted certain colors because they can stand up to permanent sunshine. Whereas Nordic things, are very pale, compensating for the lack of light. So there's that component to it. And then also, when you look at Gustavian pieces, it's so interesting because on the one hand, they're referring to really high style French pieces, but they're painted. So you have the ambition, you have the flourishes, but then you have the humbleness of it being painted. So that too has its own contrast within the piece itself. So it's not, marquetry and inlaid or gold. It's brilliance, but it's viewed through the application of the paint.
One other subject I'd love to hear your opinion on is that, this whole COVID thing has changed the way people think about a lot of things. And the word appreciation is now up in lights in our lives for so many things. We don't take things maybe as much for granted. And that part of that is the enjoyment of being home more. And, just picking up a good book, sitting in a corner, or whatever it is. But I'm curious the extent to which you see the whole design business taking off a bit as a result of people having more of a homebody mindset. Are you busier than ever as a result of that? Are people really saying, I want to do more work in my house?
But, conversely, I had a lot of people leave the office. They had a huge awakening thinking, okay, what if we all die tomorrow? Do I want to be doing this, or do I want to go out on my own? I had two beloved colleagues leave the profession. So people really took a hard look at their lives. And so anyway, so my point is that yes, we're really busy. A lot of people have left the workforce, and I think we're all kind of trying to hire people now.
I think you suddenly, there's nothing more wonderful than looking around your home or feeling that you walk in the door and you love it. That's a feeling that everybody should have, no matter what your taste is, no matter what your interests are. You want to feel at home and comfortable when you're at home.
Or home, any of those things. Just it's a warm embrace that you want when you're done for your day.
Yeah. So that's a good note to kind of wrap up on. And I just wanted to remind everybody, since we're talking about antiques and dealers and wonderful things for your home, that the Nantucket Antique Show is going to be opening on Thursday, August 5th at 5 o'clock. And I hope everybody that's seeing this, hopefully you'll even come to Nantucket for the show. But if you're here, then you certainly can't miss it, because it's going to be a really interesting, great thing. And, it's a funny thing. A collector always finds that spot. You talked about that. If you love a small thing and you find a spot. And a collector has a passion. There's always a spot that you'll find. My wife always, she starts off saying, where are you going to put it? what do you need it for? But we always move on. And for some reason, she always is the one who does find that special spot for something I can't live without. So come to the show and maybe you'll find something that you all can't live without.
I hope so, and I feel confident they will.